morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We're here from Bloomberg and excited to be a part of the Databricks ecosystem and to be able to discuss with you today the idea of leveraging Bloomberg data for thematic investing. And so as we introduce ourselves, my name is Michael Beal, and I'm the co-head of Enterprise Data Science and responsible primarily for the Americas. And I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katherine Laue, and I'm the Cloud Integration Product Manager for our Data Management Service Department. Great to meet you all.
Cool. So one of the common themes, just a little bit of background on myself, and then Katherine will do the same when she speaks here. Prior to joining Bloomberg, I joined Bloomberg about a year ago, and I'll tell you why I was so excited to join Bloomberg. But before that, I spent a lot of time creating investment portfolios in public equities, leveraging generative AI. And before that, I was over at JP Morgan, where I helped create their big data machine learning group. And something that has really evolved within the industry is a movement from highly active alpha and idiosyncratic market neutral to the world moving more into like smart beta. The smart beta approach kind of started off as traditional factors with the fama French, then went into sectors, but increasingly clients are looking for ways to express a theme and to be able to do that systematically and at scale. So when we speak to our clients and within the data science team, one of the things that we're very much focused on is understanding how is it that investment managers and AI researchers are leveraging our data, and what is it that we can do to improve our data, add new data products, work with great cloud integrations to make it easy for people who are trying to solve problems quickly. So within that theme, this kind of phrase is something that has come up within investment managers and wealth managers quite often. And in a traditional world where you have to have batch data processes or you're doing it in Excel or wherever it may be, it's actually scary if your portfolio manager or sales rep says, hey, I had a great meeting with client X yesterday. They're excited about NVIDIA. They're excited about AI. Can we come up with a few thematic portfolios to show them how we can do it in a smarter way than just buying a custom ETF and therefore justify the fees? So really through that process, we're here to kind of talk about exactly how that would work out. And with the Bloomberg data and the ecosystem of Bloomberg data that we have available, there's very simple ways to be able to bring that together, leveraging some of the fundamental data sector KPIs. We'll go through them in more detail as we push through it, looking at the supply chain, applying some approaches of NLP on news data and transcripts and descriptions, looking at the ESG data to see kind of how are the governance scores, looking at what are the holdings of various funds, just pulling in all the various data sets that one might be able to imagine, and through the unique linking technology and the interface with Databricks, very easily be able to put that into a development environment to be able to set up a few backtests. And that's really made possible through, as Katherine will talk about, the data modeling, where the firm has always been very much focused on consistency in the unique identifiers and the primary keys, but with a new product that we've released recently of DL+, we've really taken that, not only the initial schema loading, but also the schema evolution and turned that into a managed service for our clients to make that very easy. And then towards the end of that workflow, where I'll come back and kind of show the demo of it, being able to kind of very systematically create a process that you can both do in your development environment, but then also set up job creations to be able to run that in production. All starting off with identifying your seed company, coming up, increasing your portfolio universe with similar companies, figuring out a way to filter that down to the ones you have the highest confidence in, and then we'll look at some portfolio weighting and auto ML to be able to come up with the actual weights and the predictions for the portfolio turnover. So we'll just step through that. That's the basic agenda for the conversation today, and hopefully that'll be interesting for everybody. So as we step through, just the first thing, and I think it came up yesterday, which is AI is the easy part. It's the data preparation and cleansing, and that is the actual challenge. So Bloomberg has always had a very big focus around high-quality data that's easy to link. And our internal marketplace of data.bloomberg.com, which is accessible to all clients and prospects, has over 275 enterprise data sets, of which approximately 75 have a history that's long enough to be able to do systematic training in ML curation. So just as a quick question, how many people, if you put up your hands, have either interacted with Bloomberg Data license or through the terminal or through an Excel plugin? Good, yeah. I think in general, everybody's pretty familiar with the firm. And at least for me, coming from the outside before I saw the Bloomberg GPT paper, which is what caught my attention, I had always just thought of Bloomberg really as this, right? The reference data, some pricing data, corporate actions, some risk things, some ESG, which came along, and regulatory data, right? Really a focus on back office type of workflows to be able to do the reconciliations. And that is kind of where the firm started, but it's expanded much broader than that. And one of the core things that we're really focused on and have been focused on over the last, I'd call it 4 years or so, is really being able to capture the problem of research, right? And so starting off with company financials, which are point in time and highlighted to a company identifier so that you can be able to do consistent backtest and researching, then moving into revenue segmentation so that we could have a deeper level of granularity and understanding it. A very interesting product that was recently released is the supply chain data set, and I would certainly encourage people to come to our session tomorrow where we'll be talking more in depth around the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on here. And it really is a core effort of the firm of moving from these things that you see which are current and that we've actually launched and have clients running on to all the pipeline initiatives and ideas that we have, all with this goal of being able to capture and empower the workflows that clients are doing in Databricks and other ecosystems, but primarily to be able to give machines the type of detailed 360-degree understanding that otherwise a human being would only be able to get via the terminal or an Excel plugin. So that's really the workflow, and that's all been identified, as I mentioned, through where the firm started off as focusing in on the reference data, which you can see in the center around the security master and expanding out to corporate structure and corporate actions. But then, as you see in this amoeba plot of sorts, leveraging that focus on high-quality data, consistency, and pride in our unique identifiers and linking terminology to be able to expand horizontally and vertically across many other data sets and data universes. So would love to be able to speak with anybody who's interested in better understanding it. And as we referenced on this side, we're really continuously looking to add more products. This focus is around investment research, but it is very broad in terms of the mandate that we have of being able to take high-quality data sets that our clients have used within the terminal and making that available for people who don't want to have a human interface and just want access to the data. So with that, kind of as an overview of some of the data sets that we're going to use when we get into the demo and the components, and we'll dive a little bit deeper to understand some of them as we go through. Really, the innovation that we've created with DL Plus and the schema management and making it easy to actually integrate into Databricks is the way that researchers no longer have to worry about that full ETL process and can really just get to work quickly and be able to innovate faster. So with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Katherine, and come back for a part of the demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So to start off, especially from where I come from, I've been spending, let's say, about 2.5 years at Bloomberg at this point, the majority of the time in our data management service department. And what I've seen over time is the emphasis on the data model itself, especially when it comes to our client challenges and also those workflow-driven use cases. So when we break down some of those things we're seeing, especially in the market and directly from our clients itself, the first one is that clients want more data, and the data they want is more complex. And then from there, they want to directly engage with it. Today, it's not just about having that data available, but it's making it usable, put it in a usable state that then you can give it to not just your engineers and data wranglers, but then also operational users as well. That's extremely important to our clients. Next, in terms of technology, that's ever evolving, especially as new technology becomes available, that's new opportunities, and we also need to make sure that when we have our data available, we have it within those specific platforms that our clients want to use it in. Next, in terms of immediate benefits, and this ties into changes of your target operating model, clients, if you make a change, you want to be able to see the immediate benefits right away. You don't want to have long runways to be able to start seeing those changes occur. And then when it comes to our workflow-driven use cases, one, data efficiencies. Especially when it comes to Bloomberg, a lot of clients are pulling a lot of data via security, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in the next slide. But when it comes to pulling that data, at some point you're going to meet an equilibrium point, a turning point that then you need to decide, does it make sense to be pulling data one way, or does it make sense to purchase maybe a package, a bulk subscription instead? You want to make sure that not only are you efficiently pulling data, you're not duplicating data and hitting the same data throughout the day, but you're also being efficient at a cost perspective. Next, I kind of highlighted it on the target operating model changes, but especially as clients are going through their migration and their cloud journey, you also have to have your existing legacy workflows going as well, especially in that transition. So we need consistent sets of data within your old workflow as well as your new workflow. And then the last thing is multi-vendor ESG. A lot of clients today, they're trying to offload that work because they found it to be relatively difficult, especially because of the coverage gaps that exist today, especially across these vendors. So it's not often that I'll work with a client that'll only have one. Oftentimes they'll have 2, 3, maybe 4 different ESG vendors, and trying to have a standard entity company level information that then I can map that to all of these different vendors and expand that coverage can be rather difficult. So a lot of clients have been looking towards Bloomberg, towards the DMS department to kind of help alleviate some of the challenges that they face. In this diagram, I want to show what I like to call the complexity spectrum. So as I kind of go forward, think about every single time I'm going through this step, that is an increase of the number of users that are going to be using this data. So when clients come to us at the beginning, normally they have per security. And per security, just think of that as a la carte. I have a security of interest list. I tell Bloomberg these are the fields I want, and it's going to populate for that security list. If you start with one per security account, that's absolutely fine, but as your business starts to evolve, oftentimes we're going to see multiple per security accounts needed to cover multiple different parts of the organization. But what comes with multiple accounts means that there's probably overlaps in data. So one, you have different teams pulling data, there's probably duplicate data, and then that data is being stored in different places. You don't have a centralized repository. So it's a lot of the data science teams and data engineering teams within these organizations have to figure out how to stitch all that together. Then, I talked about it earlier, there comes a point that then oftentimes clients are going to make a transition. You're pulling enough data via per security that then it makes sense to move over to a bulk subscription. That's a pre-packaged set of data that Bloomberg has defined either based on an asset class or asset type or to fit a specific use case. So when Michael before talked about company financial data, supply chain data, all of those can be part of a bulk subscription. What comes, though, with packages is oftentimes there might be additional fields that aren't included within that package that then you still need in order to complete your full data set. And that's when we'll see clients purchase both bulk and per security data. But the issue with that is that these come in different formats. They also come based on different delivery mechanisms. Bulk comes throughout the day based on 5 market closings, whereas per security, it's a request response, and the formats themselves of the data are different. So again, you have to stitch those together. Last, and this is the final point of that complexity spectrum, is adding in that ESG data. So I've got my bulk, I've got my per security. Now, when it comes to ESG, how do I complete that picture? And that's really where Data License Plus comes in. If you haven't heard about it before, I'm going to go through about 4 steps of how we acquire the data, we model it, and then we're going to either do a publication or a collection into your downstream systems and applications. So if we focus on the left-hand side here, one, I've got my Bloomberg information at the top, and then I've got ESG at the bottom. So in terms of acquisition, instead of your teams having to deal with pulling the data itself, you guys aren't going to be touching any files anymore. Instead, Data License Plus will pull that data on your behalf, and we will load that data into our infrastructure. I'll touch on ESG a little bit more in a moment, but if we continue on, this is what the Data License Plus unified data model looks like. And this is really the magic to our solution. If everybody can focus on the left-hand side of that hexagon, I can see entities, instruments, markets, and price. And this is where if we think about those bulk subscriptions, we're talking about hundreds of different files, as well as any per security data you want. And what we've done is we've mapped all of that to entities. Entities are mapped to instruments. Instruments are mapped to the markets they're traded on. And then any corresponding pricing information you have is also mapped. So instead of having all all of these different files, which then would correlate to hundreds of different tables that then you'd have to do complex multi-key joins and unions to try and merge those together. We're talking about 4 core data products now that then has those unique market identifiers that you guys know from Bloomberg to then easily join across those data sets. So now you don't have to be an expert in the data itself to be able to pull data out to fit your use cases. Again, I'll touch on some of the ESG and the research data sets a little bit later, but just know that it isn't limited just to those 4 core tables. We know that there's additional adjacent data sets, let's call them, that again can easily be joined back because we have those common identifiers included. Next, when we were talking about that target operating model earlier, we know that clients are going through that migration. So when we were creating Data License Plus, it was super important to make sure that we supported the legacy workflows that clients had today. So one of which is going to be using the REST API. We also have per security SFTP, and then also the Beal API. So we knew, especially as clients do this transition and we see clients moving to the cloud today, we need to make sure we don't have a risk of impacting their current workflows. So instead of pointing everything to data license, they will point it to Data License Plus. The key is, though, is that it's going to come back in the same format, the same language that you're used to, until you feel comfortable with your new migration to then switch everything over. And that was a really big key aspect, especially when we were creating this product. The last thing I'll highlight then is the publication, and this is really why we're here today. So being as that I'm at a Databricks conference, I won't talk about maybe some of the other integrations, but as I'm talking about Databricks today, do know that we are cloud agnostic. So if you guys use additional cloud delivery mechanisms or different platforms, do know that we can support delivery into those different providers. But the key here is in terms of publication, one, especially because clients are on this cloud journey, they might not be ready right away based on delivering data to Databricks. So the first thing is we can deliver Parquet files to SFTP that then you can load so we can start accumulating that history so then when you are ready to migrate over into the cloud, then you already have all of those files available in that standard model that then we can just drop those in. For clients that are ready to move forward with Databricks or any of the other cloud providers, we can take the data that we had acquired on your behalf, it's been modeled, it's been stitched together into that core unified data model, and then on your behalf deliver that into your different cloud environments. Just to kind of close out on the unified data model itself, a lot of this is based on those core tables, and when we think about those bulk files coming in throughout the day at different times, although clients could try and do this work themselves, the key is that we are the subject matter experts at Bloomberg Data. I always like to say this, no one knows Bloomberg like Bloomberg, right? And so the department that I've been working in has 10 plus years of expertise of specifically trying to take all of the new models, especially talking to our product managers within enterprise data to make sure that we are making the best decisions for the data sets themselves. And when we look on the right-hand side, and this is something Michael is going to show later, all of these additional adjacent data sets can also be linked back. So when we think about supply chain and Kofi data, all of those can be mapped back to the unified data model. But then also when it comes to ESG, and this is really important, because we have the entity level data within the unified data model, we're talking about 7.4 million entity records. And what we've done is if you have these third-party ESG providers, we can link that back to our entity data product at the top. And the key there is because we have all the parent-child relationships all the way up to the ultimate parent, we can also expand the coverage, which has been really important to clients. So let's say I didn't have an ESG score for a specific entity for one of those ESG providers. I can take the parent identifier that has an ESG score and push that down. And you know exactly what information was an immediate link versus a push-down link. So there, we're expanding the coverage that you have today from ESG, not only for one vendor, but across all the different vendors that you have. All right, now, before we switch back to Michael, I'm going to move into a short demo.
Sorry, you're on the left, yeah.
Yep. Awesome. So just to show an example of what this looks like, and hopefully everybody in the back can see, I keep talking about that core unified data model as kind of that magic, that core to our solution, and I just want to give a visual of why we see so much value out of this and why our customers see that value. So if we look here, I'm selecting fields that could have been sourced from bulk or per security. And what I'm seeing here is I have my entity, my instrument, my market, and my price tables all from one standard core schema. Now, using what we call BPL identifiers, I can easily join across these data sets, so I don't need to know all the primary keys associated. That's something we will give you that information, but again, you don't need to be an expert to be able to join these data sets together. Now in this output, what I can see for the ultimate parent Apple Inc., I have entity information, I have entity, I have instrument, I have market, and I have price data all in one output. If you were to try and do that work yourself, that would be a lot of mapping like I talked about earlier to try and stitch all that together. And again, we've eliminated any duplicates that might be there from the multiple different files that you're consuming. So now you have that golden copy of data that then you can use in an expansive way or for the specific use cases that you have. Next. Because all this data is being loaded in, and we can think of this as a central cache, we know that certain teams are going to have different use cases. So especially when we look at the instrument table, there's additional filtering that we've added in to try and help meet those different use cases. And so when we look at this query here, I just want you to focus on the where clause. So we've added in what we call BPL classifiers to make it really easy to filter through the instrument table. So although right now instrument has equities, fixed income, futures, options, let's say my team was only interested in corporate bond data. I can define my classifier 2 to be corporate bond, and so then in my output, even though I have everything within my instrument table, I can then see that all of the values within are going to be corporate bond, and classifier 1 is also going to be at an asset class level, and I can see all those are fixed income. So if I wanted to filter through, I can do it at an asset class or an asset type level, which again, we're continuing to evolve what this model looks like to make it easier to fit the different use cases that our clients have. I'm going to skip down one more. Next, when we talk about those adjacent data sets, one of which is going to be corporate actions data, and this is a really popular data set, especially when it comes to Bloomberg data. So in this example, I am looking at my corporate actions table, which is in my EXT or my extension schema. So any of those adjacent data sets will be put in an extension schema, but again, just to show how easy it is to join across these different data sets, I've joined it with my entity level data. And let's say in this use case, I want to know what the action ID, the effective date, and see where, for a specific business date, where a name change occurred. I can see for this date where my country of risk for my entity table is CA, there were 2 records available. If we look at the first one, I can see the old name was New Range Gold Corp, and then the old name was New Range Gold Corp, and then the new name is Pinnacle Silver and Gold Corp. So if we then look at another example here, everything I've shown so far is going to be the latest values available. So when I think about my core schema, the latest record I have for all my entity level data will be contained within core. What we've done too is, in order to fit those different workflows that clients have, is we've created a corresponding revision table for all of those latest data sets. So when I think about my core entity, my core instrument, market, and price, I also have a corresponding rev core, which has entity, instrument, and price as well. And what that is a point-in-time historical reference from the moment we started delivering data into your environment. So when we think about those accumulation of record, if I started today, a year from now, I'm going to have a year's worth of history for all of those different data sets. And what I can see here, if I scroll down, is that I'm just looking at my revision core schema that has that entity table. And when I plug in that IDBB company that I saw within that corporate action, I can see in this example that as of 4/9, the old name record that we had was the old name type from that corporate action. But from 4/9, that effective business date moving forward, I can see the new name that was applied. So this just shows, again, how those revision tables can be really helpful too with deciphering the data, then also it gives you that point in time history. So all of this is kind of to help everybody feel comfortable with what that model looks like. But again, this is really just touching the surface. So once you have someone like Michael Beal within your organization that gets their hand on this data, then there's a lot more that they can do. And I want to make sure I leave enough time for Michael to be able to show what that looks like.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'll just tell you, for me, the integration of the DL Plus, it does make life a lot easier. Yeah, I think if we're doing it, traditionally when I first came, we were always just focused on the bulk products, right? So you get the parquets, you have the keys, you have the schemas, you kind of manage it yourself. And And that's fine, right? Like, it is well structured, but it's just an additional lines of code that you have to deal with and you have to manage. And having this in this structure where it's essentially once you've created the mapping of entities, instruments, markets, and prices, then regardless of whatever data set you're looking at, you're going to be able to join on some unique ID. Like, as you think about the way that the firm grew, very strong thought process in terms of the longitudinal consistency of primary IDs within a given data set, but not necessarily thought of as like people just want to do select star across their entire database and how are you going to be able to join that. So this is really that evolution of realizing that people are no longer working in silos and everybody wants access to everything. And particularly as we'll talk through when I jump into this demo, you know, really the thought that we have is like, give me more and I'll let the machine figure out what is useful versus not. So let's jump into that application of it. So now that we have the easy access to the actual core data, let's talk about what's that workflow that we want to do. So we want to start off with the seed company as NVIDIA. Then we want to be able to identify the similar companies. We're going to focus in on the revenue segmentation data and the earnings transcripts and news to grow the size. We're going to narrow it down with the supply chain. And then we're going to do the forecasts, largely leveraging the AutoML components within Databricks. And for that, that's when that'll be the only place where I'll actually show you a SQL query where we just kind of did what Katherine kind of showed, but just with a lot more data to feed into that feature store. Ultimately, as we come through that full workflow, it's a pretty simple end-to-end workflow of having your process data, having it nice and integrated in the flat files, kind of creating some functions that are going to do some transformations that we already are thinking of and we want to do for the feature engineering side. We'll then write that as a new table leveraging the feature engineering client. And then write that table, and then we're going to then use that table upstream as our AutoML feature store, which is, sorry, I should be specific with the words. This isn't a part of the broader feature store where you can pull in other people. It's just the feature models that we've created within the data frame, and then breaking that into our train, test, validate, using scikit-learn, and train the model, and then ultimately deploy it off of the best prediction model that comes out of the package here. So let's jump into that. Come here. Okay, so here what we're starting off with is, as we talked about, we want to get this idea of the investment universe and leveraging that for revenue segmentation. So as we do that, let's just take a quick look at what that revenue segmentation data actually represents. So it has coverage across 29,000 companies in Asia Pacific, another 13.5 thousand in the US, and specifically within North America, full coverage across 9,251 companies going back about 10 years. And then what it's really driven by, as we look through this, and the core that I want you to take away is there is as companies report in the way that we've mapped it then, so we have essentially out of that full universe of 51,000, every company is going to be able to say what is their top sector, right? Apple is a technology company, but so is Amazon. Then you're going to go to the level 2, which is your industry group, down to the industry name and so forth and so on, where eventually if you go too far and you get into level 7, 8, then your numbers are going to get to be pretty small, but at level 5, a very significant amount of the population is reporting that. And so as we look at that, just as an example, and pulling in all this data, we can then launch a Stacker interface to do this. If we wanted to kind of see how that looks for Apple, just as an example here, so we can see that, as I mentioned, Apple on its top level is a technology company, but then as you come down to the ultimate end of that tree, it's getting down to handheld computers, personal computers, media, et cetera. And importantly, this is a very important way that we can look at this over time, is to then be able to see kind of how has that evolved in terms of their revenue composition across different sectors. At this, I think it's at the 2 level, and seeing what's actually growing that and what's evolving in their trends. And then that it also enables us to be able to very easily compare companies that, while in this case Apple versus Amazon, you can see, yes, one's a technology, one is more driven by consumer discretionary at that top level. As we continuously dive a little bit deeper, we can get a better understanding of what's driving those differences. Apple clearly driving around communication and equipment, whereas Amazon really driven around this Amazon marketplace. So with that basic understanding of the data set, we can come back in to our products where we've now taken NVIDIA and we've done the breakout leveraging the column is percentage of revenue. So we can see here that on the level 5 level, which we're going to focus in on, 100% of their revenue is being driven by logic, processors, and app specific, right? So with that knowledge as to like what is it that defines or NVIDIA and an AI side, if you had no idea about NVIDIA, then you would look at this segment breakdown and be able to see what's really driving that. So we'll then do another filter to try to find some similar companies across that. And from there, we're taking the full Russell 2000 universe, and we're just filtering it across that is percentage of revenue for the logic and processors apps at the level 5 component. And we see kind of this, that there are a number of smaller companies where it's 100% of their universe, and then it's breaking down on a little bit of a tail as we come down. This is conditional upon them having any revenue within that segment. And so we'll just do a simple filter where we say, okay, our universe will consist of those that have at least 50% of their revenue driven from this. So we see that within that gives us a universe of 85 names. Within the NLP side, so now we're going to take some of the textual data, and just to give you a sense as to kind of how that's working here, if I come back over to this app. So essentially what we're doing is we're training a model, artificial intelligence. And we have a couple of models loaded that have the embedding functions down here. It's running through the actual descriptions, and then it's doing a cosine similarity search of the query that we've put versus the embedded vector score that it put in for those actual descriptions. We can see kind of just visually, which is the way that I want us to all take away from here. Let's scroll down here, and eventually it'll come. Sorry for that lag. So what we see now is based off of whether it's the transcripts or the descriptions, that when you're running it through an LLM and focusing in on the embedded vector embeddings module that comes with most of the LLMs that are available in the marketplaces, that hopefully this will scroll, okay. Then that what we've done here is now we're color coding it with the sector, but the LLM had no idea as to which sector it was in, all right? So you see kind of up and to the right, financials, based off of the descriptions, it feels like those are where the companies are. To the left, we have healthcare, et cetera. So then we're taking that embedded query and then doing a similarity match to come up with the companies that we think are most specifically related to this query of artificial intelligence. So that gives us another 60 names. So our portfolio size is now at roughly 143 names. So that's great. The next thing that we wanted to look at is the supply chain data. And within the supply chain, which again, we'll talk more in detail around tomorrow, it gives us a very detailed understanding as to who are the actual suppliers of any given company based off of and breaking that down around their revenue, their CapEx, et cetera. So we can see here that now we have this ring of, or within that whole universe and leveraging a network graph, we have the ability to now turn this into the network of the actual overlap of their suppliers. And we're going to decide that we want to focus in on the ones that have the highest concentration within their actual supply chain with NVIDIA. So from there, now that we've done that and we have our universe of, across all the different types, we have revenue segmentation only. But eventually we come down to the filter where we have the revenue segmentation plus the NLP plus the concentration with their SPLC. The last thing we're going to do is throw on some more of the information around the facilities data, which now we can tie companies down to the actual facilities that they have and have a geographic view as to the actual companies in our portfolio. We're not going to use that for the portfolio segmentation, but as we'll show now for the actual ML training and the features, we're going to actually provide that information as ancillary components for there. So that's within the ML feature engineering, for which in lack of time, I'll just kind of talk at a very high level, where we've basically done what Katherine had done with just the core reference tables, but we've added on top of that now credit default risk. We've added on top of that the supply chain, facilities, and a few other data sets, ESG, that we want to go through for here. So now, with all of those features set up, we set up our data set, which comes out of that as the DF over the full date range. We're doing some filtering to bring that down and some normalization. And then ultimately, we have the output here of DF auto ML inputs. And then we'll take that data frame, and we're going to run that through a few models. In this case, we chose mainly classification and random forest models, as well as some regression models. And we run that through the AutoML to come up with the one that we see as the best performing. And as you use those features, then you can dive into the notebooks and be able to explore it, but we don't have the time to look at the underlying features that are driving it. But as we then pull that out, then the components that we're going to do, now that we have the features, we have a model that we like, is now just to turn that into the actual prediction set and create the portfolio backtest. So we're pulling in, adding on to this just the Kofi pricing, which is our fundamental quant pricing data to have point-in-time information around that. And we're taking our X-array, which we've done the split within scikit-learn, and we're applying the objective function as the next month's price performance. And so we run that through our backtester, and then ultimately, lo and behold, we come up with a portfolio where when we start off with an equally weighted 100 million, and then we constrain how much we still want to make sure that it's giving some allocation to every portfolio and not taking any name to zero, that we are able to come up with, within those risk constraints, a portfolio that is outperforming the underlying benchmark that a client otherwise would be able to get within a broader ETF. And finally, just with that model, then the other question that portfolio managers or clients will always ask is, now that you've created something that is supposed to be representative of some theme, what's going to be the tracking error of your portfolio versus what I could otherwise get available as an ETF? So we're going to take that same model, just retrain it. Instead of predicting the price, we're going to predict the beta. And we see kind of up until the end, which I think would mean revert if we put that into the sample size. We did a very good job of being able to predict what the beta was going to be to the portfolio, such that at the end, going back to what our client had asked us for, if I just come here. So if we come back to this way, through this workflow, we were able to start off with the data sets that we wanted to choose, be very easily able to incorporate those, leveraging the DL Plus interface, be able to run distributed Spark clusters to be able to analyze the data at scale and not have to wait overnight for the runs to take place, create some features, run that through the feature enhancement protocols, load that into AutoML, save that into our model registry, then download that or call on that best performing model out of the registry to be able to apply it to our price data, and ultimately be able to say to our portfolio manager or whoever our end client is that, yes, no problem, we'll have it ready for you tomorrow. So with that, I'd love to just say thank you for your time, and if there's any questions, our representatives and some of our colleagues from Bloomberg are in the back, most notably Svetla, who is wearing a red dress and waving her hand, as well as Rob and many other components here. We'd love to continue to have the conversation, and certainly please join us tomorrow when we talk a little bit more about the supply chain. But hopefully this is helpful, and we look forward to continuing that conversation. Thank you.